We're going to start with issue number 8 with DWR and the Diablo Canyon loan. Ask people to come up. Exit, thank you. And I believe you have a presentation. We'll start with DWR when you're ready.
We do have some opening comments, but I'm going to start with my colleague from the California Energy Commission, and we'll join her right after that. Thank you.
All right, this is on. All right. Good morning. My name is Liz Gill, and I'm the Program Manager for the Reliability Analysis Branch at the California Energy Commission. And this morning, I'll be providing some background on the why of the Diablo Canyon extension and whether anything has changed since the passage of SB 846. So again, I'll be focused more on the need and the why, and then I'll pass it over to my colleague, Delphine. So climate change-induced extreme events are making it more challenging, as we know, to maintain electric grid reliability. In 2020, the state experienced an extreme weather event equivalent to a 1 in 30-year demand situation that resulted in short rotating outages on August 14th and 15th, 2020. In 2021, a wildfire in Oregon took down the California-Oregon electric transmission intertie, causing the state to lose 4,000 megawatts of import capacity during a heat wave at the hottest time of the day, and really elevating the threat that wildfires pose to the state's transmission system and system-wide grid reliability. This led to an emergency proclamation by the governor ordering the agencies to take measures to bolster grid reliability. Additionally, equipment and manufacturing and supply chains were heavily disrupted and significantly slowed during the COVID-19 pandemic. Manufacturing and these supply chains have taken a long time to recover to pre-pandemic levels, let alone ramp up to meet the growth in renewable and zero carbon project demand, both in California and globally. At the same time, the state was looking ahead to the retirement of significant generation assets in the 2024 to 2026 timeframe. So Diablo Canyon, which accounts for 9% of the state's total power generation and about 17% of its clean electricity, as well as several natural gas generators. These events and planned retirement of capacity led to the conclusion that the state needed to take extraordinary measures in the near term in order to maintain grid reliability under these climate-driven extreme conditions while we allow load-serving entities procurement and renewable project development to catch up. In 2022, the administration brought forward analysis indicating that the state may need up to 5,000 megawatts of additional capacity when accounting for the unprecedented levels of planned procurement in order to maintain grid reliability during extreme events such as what was experienced in 2020. And these events, again, generally fall outside of typical grid planning standards. So in 2020, the administration proposed and the legislature passed both AB 205, which created the Strategic Reliability Reserve, and SB 846, which provided a path for the limited extension of the Clean Diablo Canyon Power Plant to 2030. Just days after the legislature passed SB 846, it became even more clear that these extraordinary measures were warranted. August 31st was the last day of the legislative year and the day that SB 846 was voted out, and was also the start of a West-wide extreme heat event that started to stress the grid beyond its design capacity. On September 6th, the CAISO territory reached a record new demand of 52,000 megawatts, which is the equivalent of a 1 in 27-year event. So as a part of SB 846, CEC was directed to determine whether the state's electric demand forecasts for 2024 through 2030 show potential for electric grid reliability deficiencies if Diablo Canyon Power Plant operations were not extended beyond 2025, and whether extending operations to at least 2030 is prudent, in order to ensure electric grid reliability and consistency with the state's greenhouse gas emission reduction goals. The CEC evaluated scenarios that reflected planned energy procurement and future demand under extreme heat events equivalent to those experienced in 2020 and 2022, while considering resource delays consistent with those that have been experienced over the past several years, as well as risks to electric transmission that bring in critical imported electricity to the state. In February 2023, the CEC completed an analysis that concluded that there is significant risk and increased likelihood of rotating power outages without the extension of Diablo Canyon, and that it would be prudent to extend operations until the state can confirm that the necessary energy resources are online. The analysis determined that extending Diablo Canyon also provides a decided advantage in the sense that it is a firm low-carbon resource, meaning that it's generally dependable and it does not emit GHG emissions or greenhouse gas emissions. In December 2023, and as ordered by 846, following a nearly year-long rulemaking, the CPUC approved a decision to extend Diablo Canyon's retirement dates for Units 1 and 2 to October 2029 and 2030, respectively. So again, climate change-induced extreme events are making it more challenging to maintain electric grid reliability. This has not changed since SB 846 was passed, and in fact, we saw record demands during an extreme and extended heat event just days after it was passed in 2022. We have significant levels of new clean energy resources, over 16,000 megawatts of new nameplate capacity that have come online since 2020, but we know that we'll continue to need additional resources in order to maintain grid reliability and meet our state's greenhouse gas reduction goals moving forward to 2045. This was taken into account in our analysis and does not change the current outlook. We're in a better position going into this summer because of the ongoing load-serving entity procurement efforts, the resources being operationalized through the Strategic Reliability Reserve, and because of the extension of existing resources, including Diablo Canyon. In fact, the CEC analysis indicates that if we experience the same range of resource delays next summer that we've experienced in the past, that we'd be at risk of shortfalls, even under a standard planning metric of a 1 in 10-year event, without Diablo Canyon. Without Diablo Canyon, the Strategic Reliability Reserve would also not be sufficient to maintain reliability during the equivalent of a September 2022 event. So we know that the actions taken by the legislature and the administration have placed the state in a better position to avoid rotating power outages as a result of supply shortfalls during extreme events for this summer and for the next several summers. But we must be vigilant and continue to manage and plan for all of the known and unknown variables that impact our collective ability to provide reliable, clean electricity during extreme events. Thank you, and I'll pass it to my colleague, Delphine.
Thank you very much.
The microphones don't like to be touched. They're very generally
very sensitive. All right, can everyone hear me? No, that doesn't sound like. All right, one more time. All right, does that seem to be working? Okay, thank you very much. Apologies for that. Thank you to my colleague. I have some brief opening comments, and then we'll pass on to my colleague at Department of Finance. So as described by Liz Gill, my CEC colleague here, the current outlook hasn't changed the need for Diablo Canyon, and retaining its baseload GHG-free generation is prudent, in the public interest, and needed for electric reliability. SB 846 tasked DWR with administering a state loan to support Diablo Canyon's license extension, which was needed immediately because Pacific Gas and Electric, PG&E, which is Diablo's operator, was applying for a license extension in less than the standard 5-year requirement term required by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. To repay the loan, PG&E applied and qualified for the Department of Energy's Civil Nuclear Credit Program, which DWR is not a party to, but they have since been able to successfully qualify for that program. Based on our discussions with PG&E, the company needs the remaining $400 million in the third quarter of 2023 to support license renewal. For example, as part of the license renewal process, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission requires extensive inspections, which PG&E must complete under a compressed deadline. Keep in mind that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission renewal is a process PG&E actually began 15 years ago because it normally is such an involved process. PG&E halted that process at the state's direction and has now restarted it at the state's direction as well, but with an even more compressed time frame. These inspections are timed to align with regular maintenance schedules at the power plant, and the first of which occurred in fall 2023, and the next is during, right now, spring 2024. Furthermore, commitments have already been made to support additional inspections with the requisite staffing, equipment, material support, including refueling, through 2025. So PG&E has secured these commitments with expedited fulfillment and delivery, given the urgency of meeting the highly compressed deadlines under SB 846. Similarly, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission provided a waiver to PG&E to exempt it from its normal process in order to expedite the license renewal process, and devoted its own staffing and resources specifically to Diablo Canyon in order to target a license renewal decision by August 2025. So if PG&E does not receive the final $400 million in the third quarter of 2024, extension operations may be jeopardized. PG&E has previously stated to DWR that state loan funds and DOE credit funds are the only funds available to pursue extended operations because SB 846 prohibits PG&E from requesting recovery of expenses from ratepayers to fund the relicensing process for this state reliability asset. If PG&E's Diablo Canyon time-sensitive extension funding is depleted, and therefore PG&E is unable to complete its license renewal work, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission likely would void the timely renewal exception originally granted. This would move the license retirement dates back to its current expiration dates of November 2nd, 2024, this year for Unit 1, and August 26, 2025 for Unit 2. If Diablo Canyon does not continue to pursue a license extension, it would also no longer be eligible for any of the Department of Energy's Civil Nuclear Credit Award, and none of the money that the state has already loaned to PG&E could be repaid using those funds. Furthermore, if Diablo Canyon retires at its current license expiration dates, again, as early as November 24 of this year for Unit 1, grid reliability could be jeopardized as it does provide, as my colleague mentioned, approximately 9% of California's total electricity supply and represents 17% of the state's carbon-free electricity mix. Although clean resources continue to be built at an unprecedented pace in the state, they still face challenges coming online, such as supply chain delays and interconnection limitations. So based on DWR's understanding, there may also be a tight near-term resource adequacy market, especially for these for non-emitting resources. So this concludes my remarks, and I'll hand it over to my colleague at Department of Finance.
Good morning, Andrew Hull with the Department of Finance. The most recent JLBC letter noted the need for a verifiable loan repayment schedule. We just wanted to note that it's likely going to be several years before that level of detail is available. There's 3 potential avenues for repayment, all of which have some level of uncertainty. The earliest we would know how much of the DOE Nuclear Credit Award will be available for repayment is 2027. Further, excess operating revenues in the final year of operations may occur after 2029 for Unit 1 and 2030 for Unit 2, based on CPUC's conditionally approved extension date for operations. And lastly, at this point, we don't know if there's going to be other funds made available over the other federal funds over the next few years to help offset the loan, which would also impact that schedule. Each of these elements play a factor in the repayment timeline, which again are unknown at this time.
Okay, thank you. You had a quick clarification. Well, we want to go to the LAO, but you have a quick clarification on that, or?
Well, so this is the general fund loan to PG&E. So, I'm sorry if I missed this, but is there any kind of talk about DWR trying to forgive part or entirety of the loan, or and what kind of conditions are you looking at to permit that sort of thing?
We're going to get into very
You're gonna
detailed
get-
questioning here, but
is that what you were just mentioning?
There are forgiveness provisions in the loan. It's too early to be able to know for certain whether that will be a scenario or not.
Okay. I want to ask further about that, but
yeah, we'll go into very detailed
Okay.
discussions about this. Let me first turn over to the legislative accounting office.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Senator. Sonia Pettick with the Legislative Analyst's Office. We don't have a lot of substantive comments to add to this discussion, but we would just acknowledge that the legislature is in a challenging position right now given the budget deficit, but it also did agree to provide the loan of $1.4 billion to DWR for the purposes of loaning it to PG&E to extend the life of Diablo Canyon. And as was noted, PG&E was successful in securing an award with the federal government for up to $1.1 billion. However, some of the conditions associated with that federal award create some uncertainties about both the amount and timing of possible loan repayments, as noted by Mr. Hull from Department of Finance.
Okay. Thank you. Well, first, I appreciate you being here as well, Dr. Gill, and presenting the background, helpful. I think we're not here to discuss the that piece of it, but it was helpful. I think background, and I think clearly, as was mentioned, being such a large percent of our power load and being greenhouse gas free. Certainly I believe this was the right thing to do. I think we're going to talk specifically really about the loan here today, and I think that'll be the focus as we just started with. We're going to start with some foundational stuff. Senator Blakes, for you.
No, whenever you're done.
Okay,
I'm just
yeah.
raising my hand.
Yeah. Well, why don't we go ahead? I think, yeah.
You
When
can
ready.
start with foundational things.
Yeah.
You're the chair.
Well, I think those things you were looking at were pretty foundational, so.
Okay, so thank you for the presentation. I wanted to have a little bit more information about PG&E reported record profits in 2023, and so I'm really just wondering, why can't PG&E fund the Diablo Canyon extension effort using other funds that don't come from increases to ratepayers? I know that was prohibited, but why is there no option for that?
So so the current DWR loan agreement was crafted based on all the provisions from SB 846. So whatever is allowable under the loan is directly derivative of what is in SB 846. So obviously that's the current scenario is not anything that we could have necessarily foreseen, but also was not expressed in the legislation. So in terms of repayment of the loan, SB 846 only detailed three main pathways, which is the DOE credit program, which I'll also note at the time that when SB 846 was passed, we were only still learning about this DOE program, and PG&E had not even applied for it. But the intent was for PG&E to apply for it and see if they could get into the program. So that was the first repayment option. The second one, as Mr. Hall mentioned, is revenues in its final year of operation. California Public Utilities Commission has conditionally approved an extension to 2029 for the first unit, 2030 for the second unit. So that would be the second pathway of potential payback to the loan. And then the third one would be, any other funding that PG&E could apply for. And our understanding from PG&E, not to speak for them, but they have committed to look at other sources if they qualify and are available.
But you're talking about loan repayment, and what I'm really asking about is the $400 million request for a loan now in the budget.
Correct. So for the loan was crafted in order to provide monies to them for this extension, which is also under SB 846 what the state would want them to pursue. So this was not anything that PG&E had planned for in the past. So none of this was budgeted. So as far as we understand, this is the funding that will be provided to help them with the loan, with pursuing the license renewal.
So basically, are you saying that they're not able to do the work without it?
For the $400 million, our understanding is that yes, there are commitments made. So there is a schedule that they must adhere to from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and those are the set inspections, which are typically done when the unit is on a planned outage. They're able to, open up the unit or make upgrades or have the inspectors be able to look at different things. So those are very, very carefully timed and calibrated. There is a large amount of preparation, including staffing, including coordinating to obtain the right materials and services in order to support all those inspections. And those inspections are happening right now. So we had one in fall, we have the current one in spring, and we have more coming up on the rotation in order to meet the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's timeline for them to try to get a final decision on Diablo Canyon license renewal by August 2025, which is the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's projected timeline for Diablo Canyon. So I think everyone's trying to work together to time it very tightly to meet those deadlines, and that's why the remaining $400 million is needed because PG&E continues to progress along the license renewal efforts.
Okay, thank you. I'll let some of my colleagues ask questions too.
Sure, I'll go to Senator Donnelly. Before I do that, I just wanted to note for a moment, because it was quite a moment the other day. Do talk about the need for this, that batteries, it was because this just happened this week, batteries built just in the last 3 years were providing 3 Diablo Canyons worth of power one night this week, and we're the main source for the California grid. So I do appreciate and I want to recognize all of our efforts to get lots of batteries on the grid, and to show that is having an effect as well, while this extension is going on. We'll go to Senator Donnelly first, and we'll have a lot of questions on this.
I don't know. I don't know where to start because I've been here too long, I guess, maybe. First, I just want to make a general comment. I mean, for myself, I voted against shutting it down and voted against starting it back up because we're, quite frankly, in a position where let me just ask the first couple questions, and then maybe what happens if the loan is not executed this fiscal year?
I'm assuming, sir, you mean if
$400 million.
400
Yes.
Correct.
Same thing that Senator Blakesford just tried to get an answer for. Maybe
Okay.
we can get it this way.
Fair point. So let me rephrase this. So right now, PG&E, as well as the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, are on a schedule to try to allow for the inspections to continue in order to get to that hopefully final relicensing decision by August 2025. So everything is in place now to start those inspections, which began fall 2023 and are continuing. Part of the issue is because the license renewal process was started under such an expedited time frame. Typically, there's 5 years or more time
To start it back up or to shut it back down?
I'm sorry.
It was 15 years in the process of shutting down. No, 10 years, right?
Right. So, sorry, we're talking about two different pathways. So, the 15 years that I referred to was the first time PG&E approached the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to relicense. So, that 15 years it's not uncommon for nuclear power plants to start many, many years ahead of time. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission actually has a minimum of 5 years ahead of time. So, PG&E obviously was well ahead of the 5 years. But with SB 846, what happened is now they're in that 5-year window, and that's not allowed by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. So in fact, the NRC actually had to produce a waiver for PG&E to allow Diablo Canyon to go through a relicensing process in less than the standard time. Because that time was so short, PG&E did its level best, from what we understand, to go out and expedite all of the contracts, the staffing, the materials, the nuclear fuel needed in order to go through all the inspections with the NRC. So not only has PG&E been spending money in order to meet these specific inspections that have occurred and are occurring, but they also have made financial commitments for getting those materials under an expedited manner to support the rest of those inspections coming up. So therefore, it is very critical for PG&E to get the last $400 million because of the commitments and because of the time frame they're under for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to complete this relicensing.
All right, let me ask, is the relicensing of Diablo Canyon in jeopardy? I mean, and if so, when is the drop dead date that the funds must be loaned?
So from our understanding is they are at a break point around spring time frame where they will be passing potentially the $1 billion mark in terms of funding. So from what we understand, based on the kind of the forecast we have, is that in the third quarter of 2024, they would need that remaining $400 million. Which is
November 2nd of 2024 is the first unit would come offline if FERC doesn't act and allow them to stay open.
The Nuclear Regulatory Commission, correct.
Oh yeah, it's not, it's NRC, sorry. So let me get my mind around this. They were allowed to raise rates to decommission it to start with, and then we accelerated that. Actually, we said no. The governor made it. He was actually the lieutenant governor then. Said we're going to shut down the power plant. So they were able to pass that on to the ratepayers to decommission. And there's also a fund that's set aside for decommissioning that's ongoing all the time. So those monies are already set aside, correct?
I'm sorry, I can't opine on anything outside of the DWR alone.
So let me ask it this way: are they able to raise rates to continue to run their nuclear power, the Diablo power plant, or are the taxpayers paying for it? Everybody's paying for it through the loan.
From my understanding, is for ongoing operations of Diablo Canyon, that is a topic of discussion at the California Public Utilities Commission, which will go through their rate proceeding. The DWR loan, funded through the general fund, is only about transitioning into that license renewal period.
So the gentleman earlier talked about that we don't know if they're going to repay it or not. We were really 846 really didn't say. There was a lack of detail in here and what's going to happen with the future monies that we're putting forth. They may not pay it back. There's nothing in there in 846 that says we're going to get our money back.
Surgery Department of Finance. So 846 did clarify that there were the three options for repayment. One of them being the nuclear
loan forgiveness.
Award. Well, no, one of them being the actual DOE award, which they have been awarded up to $1.1 billion. So up to $1.1 billion has been what DOE has already kind of signaled is the maximum award they would get.
Now that's from the feds.
Yeah, and
right.
that's what one portion of what PG&E would use to repay back the general fund loan. So that's one avenue to repay back the general fund loan. The other is excess revenue remaining in the final year of operation, which would be 2029 and 2030. And then the third being other potential federal funds. And then, of course, the fourth being potential forgiveness of a part of a loan, which was part of 846. So SB 846 had a provision that DWR had to include a loan forgiveness provision in the actual contract with PG&E. So that is at the direction of SB 846.
And that would be then taxpayers of California would be picking up the tab. So the DOE did give them an installment, I guess what we would call it, of 1.1?
It's up to 1.1.
How much did we get?
So you want to speak to the timeline?
Yeah, so there's a timeline here. So it's all retroactive. The DOE, so again, actually I do want to clarify, DWR is not a party to this loan between the Department of Energy and PG&E, so I will speak on what
it's coming out of the general fund then?
I'll speak on what I understand of the
loan. Can I jump in here for a moment? Just let me go through my understanding of it, and then maybe you can comment back to response to Nardali's question. So my understanding is the DOE award includes $741.4 million in base credits. So that's money we are highly, highly, highly likely to get, right? We're basically expected to get. But then there's $359 million in incremental transition costs. And the loan agreement states that incremental transition costs include costs not included in the general rate case that result from, quote, an unscheduled outage or an emergency operating condition or a new compliance requirement not reasonably foreseeable as of the execution date. So one of my line of questioning, so just Senator Daly, I think the $741 million, everyone, $0.4 million, everyone agrees we're probably very, we're going to get, right? I think that's certainly the expectation and the base cost. But these incremental transition costs, do we expect PG&E to incur costs? Number one, is that my understanding correct? And then on that incremental transition cost, then of course the excess. We'll get to the excess profits in a moment, or the excess revenues in a moment. But just on this part of the incremental transition costs, do you expect PG&E to incur costs for unscheduled outage, an emergent operating condition, or a new compliance requirement not reasonably foreseen? So two questions. One, is that my understanding sort of correct? And then two, do we really expect to really get any of that incremental transition costs?
I appreciate that question, Chair. So first I'll say that DWR is not a party to the actual credit award and payment agreement between Department of Energy, U.S. Department of Energy, and PG&E. From what our understanding is, everything that has been provided is also based on an estimate. So technically, from the reading that we have of the payment agreement, is that there will be an audit that is conducted. So PG&E will have to provide actual historical numbers looking back to Department of Energy. Department of Energy will then audit it. So in terms of those base credits, yes, that is what is expressed in the current agreement. However, we won't know until PG&E kind of goes through all that auditing with the Department of Energy what that final number is. As part of that audit process, PG&E can also put forward anything that it feels were costs, above and beyond the initial estimate between the Department of Energy and PG&E. So our understanding is that yes, there's numbers on the books that will be audited when the time comes, and then B, that PG&E can go back to Department of Energy with any changed states or any different circumstances that it happens upon, including increased costs.
So the audit is really for that base, for the 741.4.
Yes.
But then again, just to be really clear, if there are no quote unscheduled outages, emergent operating conditions, or new compliance requirements, then they would only receive $741.4 million. Is that your understanding?
If that is what the final audit numbers come out to be.
Okay. So number one, hopefully, Senator Daly, that's helpful.
I want to just follow up with one last question, if I may, because I think it's important. So basically, we're expecting the DOE to backfill hopefully a portion of the loan. So that's everybody in America can pay that pays taxes. And if they don't, then the taxpayers of California, not the ratepayers, but the taxpayers of California will pick up whatever that amount, the difference is. We don't know exactly what the taxpayers of America are going to pay.
Correct.
Of the 1 point, because that's still out there. We haven't got it reimbursement. We haven't got anything from DOE.
Correct.
So the second part would be then whatever the difference is. We know $400 million is for sure going to land on the backs of the general fund or the taxpayer of California.
I don't think we can.
It's not the ratepayer; it's the taxpayer, because this isn't based off of rate, right?
The loan is not based off of ratepayers, but we'll clarify, as my colleagues have expressed, that there are two other sources of funding, including revenues in the last.
And what are those?
I'm sorry.
What are the two other sources?
Yes, one source is operating revenues in excess of costs in the last year of operations. So that would be in 2029, 2030.
So that would be ratepayers' money.
It would be excess revenues in excess of costs from PG&E. I don't know if I would characterize that as ratepayer money, but maybe that's beyond my swim lane to opine on. And then the last one would be any other federal awards or grants or credits that PG&E would be eligible for and would have to apply for. So that's another source that could come to repay the full loan.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Allen.
Well, I feel like a lot of the terms that we were sold with regards to 846 in connection to energy needs and alternative energy that were all part of the pitch have really not been fulfilled by the administration. We were all asked to support it, and many of us didn't want to. And now we're being asked for this loan with, conditions that I'm not clear on. I just, I think quite frankly, we've been sidebarring about this. I think it feels like we're being taken advantage of here, quite frankly. And I understand there's a lot of broad needs, but as the chair pointed out, there's some new battery technology that's exceeding the energy contribution of Diablo Canyon on its own. So I just want to voice deep skepticism for this item, and I really hope that we'll push back. And I say this with this respect. You're all doing your jobs, but having gone through the experience of being kind of aggressively pushed into a vote on 846, I'm really dissatisfied about the extent to which the terms have been met, and I think that this committee should be pushing back.
Appreciate that. I'm going to continue to ask you a few more questions just to clarify some, but I think you're hearing some of the concerns and from the committee. I guess back to the base load for a question for a moment. The base credit's 741.4. If Diablo Canyon generated, if the generation in these years in 23, 24, 25, 26 fall below the forecasted level, is your understanding that the total amount collected in that year be less than the total amounts allocated in that year in the award? In other words, if generation falls short of forecasted levels, and there's specified in here what those levels would be. For example, in 2023, 190.9 million, which would be, we would get reimbursed at $10.76 per megawatt times 17,745,276 megawatts. So specific levels. So is your understanding if we fall below that generation, or PG&E falls below the generation in any of those years, then we would get less than the money allocated for that year from DOE. Is that your understanding?
I think that's difficult to speculate on because it would be an interplay between the generation and potentially what the market price is, and I don't have visibility into that. So I'd hate to speculate on what that is, but all told, PG&E would be required to provide all this information to DOE for the audit purpose.
Mm-hmm. Hold on one second. Okay, I want to get to this issue of excess funds, excess operating revenues. So how confident is the administration that Diablo Canyon will have excess operating revenues in the and in the last several years, has Diablo Canyon generated excess operating revenues that you know of?
Again, I hate to speculate on what the market prices could be in 2029 and 2030 because it's not just Diablo Canyon, it's obviously everything else on the grid, but also where we're going with electrification. I'll give you an example in just sort of the average market price in September 2022 was somewhere in the hundreds because of driven largely by the heat wave that we saw at the beginning of September, whereas the average price for September last year was probably a third of that. So it really is kind of dependent on what is going on in the year, the conditions, and all the other plants that are available in the mix. So unfortunately, I wouldn't be able to speculate on what that could be in those outer years.
Got it. But just for the last several years, has Diablo Canyon generated excess? I don't know the answer to them. Has Diablo Canyon generated excess operating revenues?
I do not know that off the top of my head, but we can get back to.
Okay. Yeah, I think we would certainly want to circle back on that. And then, what is expected final year of operation? Just to be very clear on that.
I'm sorry, could you repeat?
What is the expected final year of operation?
So for Unit 1, right now the conditional approval from the California Public Utilities Commission is October 31st, 2029, and then for the second unit is October 31st, 2030.
Let me just want to clarify. Oh, yeah, sure. Go ahead.
I just want to make a point of order. This is an article from late February. PG&E's profits hopped higher in 2023, buoyed by electricity and natural gas revenues that surged last year. The power company behemoth earned $2.24 billion in 2023, an increase of 24.6% in profits compared with 22. And I know, it just, it's just hard to the constant cries of poverty and oppression from us when we're continuing to offer such positive terms for them on every level. It's just hard to take, and I mean, this is kind of built up frustration over many years, I suppose, that I'm taking it on this particular loan, but it's just hard to take.
Could you address this? I mean, this is what I was referring to, but I'd really like some. There is a lot of money, and there are a lot of places where it could be found, and so coming back to us again and again. I mean, can you just address that number, 24% increase, that $2.2 billion?
Yeah, Sir Jaguar, Department of Finance. So, I mean, we can't speak to PG&E's profits and how that works. What we can say is this loan follows the structure of law, which is SB 846. And that's what we're moving forward. That's what we're proposing. That $400 million in budget year is really to continue what was required in SB 846. But we can't opine on PG&E's profits and what that means to what they do with that.
And sorry for hijacking this, Senator Allen.
No, and to be fair, that was a kind of a macro comment I was making.
Their gas companies and all their other stuff.
Yeah.
But I mean, you're the Department of Finance, so you are asking on behalf of them for this loan from the legislature. So I guess when you're reading that article and you're analyzing it, do you not see, is there been negotiation or an effort to deal with this in a different way besides just coming back to us again?
Yeah, the current proposal before the legislature is really just a continuation of SB 846, which is what is currently required in state law.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Well, I mean, it is required, but I guess the question comes down to the kind of conditions that we're imposing. And I do want to kind of parse apart a little bit my earlier question to you. Could we get a kind of a conversation about the extent to which a loan might be free? The loan itself, I suppose I don't have a problem with. It's just the idea that this is so that it could so easily be forgiven. I'd like to get more into those details, and I maybe you could share with us how that analysis is going to work in terms of a possible loan forgiveness.
Yeah, Andrew Hill with Department of Finance. I can start, and then Delphine might be able to jump in. I think what we're saying is that the provisions, were built into SB 846. The final tranche of money that's being requested is a part of that. We are not aware of the timeline necessarily and the ultimate amount that's going to be awarded from DOE, and I think that's where you're seeing some of the uncertainty is that we're loaning the money up front. It's going to take years before they do their audit to know exactly what the ultimate landing place is going to be for the repayment. So there's not that level of detail today.
But could you when I asked you earlier, I was asking about the conditions upon which they could under which DWR might forgive at least part or the entirety of the loan, and you mentioned there are certain conditions. Can you walk us through what those are and
Yeah.
Yeah, I would defer to DWR.
Okay.
Right, thank you for that. I think in the kind of the highest level, forgiveness provisions were required under SB 846. So when that was incorporated into the DWR loan with PG&E, we looked at first, where funds could come from. And so again, the three that we had articulated, that would be the only source of repayment for the loan. And if PG&E were also to adhere to the other requirements of SB 846, for example, they continue to pursue a license renewal. They're operating the power plant in a safe and reliable manner. So all of those other conditions that also SB 846 required, if they adhere to those, but the sources of repayment were short, then that could trigger a forgiveness. That can trigger the forgiveness provision.
Mm-hmm. How much do we really audit or drill down on those assertions when those are made? I mean, how much is this kind of relying upon their declarations, and how much can we ground truth those kinds of assertions that, of course, are very, very economically valuable for them to argue a certain way when it comes to a loan forgiveness of this size?
So we've done due diligence in several different ways. Obviously, one of the first and foremost activities is that PG&E continues to pursue its license renewal with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. So not only has PG&E reported on those progress, but DWR also has touch points with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission staff on their progress and be able to conduct the various inspections and audits that are required under their process. In addition, we coordinate very regularly with the California Public Utilities Commission. So there's aspects and connections there that we want to make sure that PG&E is meeting. There's also paper trail that PG&E provides to DWR as we do our semi-annual true-up process every 6 months. So we have a paper trail of the costs that they're incurring in order to support the license renewal. And we also have our colleagues at the Diablo Canyon Independent Safety Commission, and they opine on not only the safe and reliable operation of Diablo Canyon, but they also take on several other salient questions with regard to not only the SB 846 loan, but also just general operations of Diablo Canyon. So we don't always default to what PG&E tells us, though we do have many conversations with them, but there is sort of a constellation of other parties that have different roles and responsibilities that we do engage with to make sure that they are pursuing the license extension pursuant to SB 846.
Yeah. Okay. LAO is here. You're with LAO. Okay. Do you have you? I'm sure you've given this some thought. I know this is a macro question, but knowing what you know about the commitments made, and the promises made to the legislature under SB 846, especially with so much of the pitch was we're going to do everything we can to address renewable energy issues, but ultimately this is really something we desperately need because of resiliency and grid reliability. How do you think we should be thinking back from your perspective on the SB 846 deal on the macro level?
Sonia Pettick with the LAO. I recognize what you're trying to ask, but it's, the legislature did pass SB 846, and, the intention in that bill was that the funding would be paid back. It would achieve certain goals. The funding would be paid back, set up certain kinds of terms and conditions that we understand have filtered down to the contract with PG&E. So at this point, we're not really in a position to comment on, whether that was a good deal at the time or what changes, you would make it.
Does anyone have any comments about it? Because I understand we're fulfilling the terms of SB 846, and that's what this is about, and we need to fulfill our commitments. I totally understand it, but I do think that
if no one's prepared to kind of fully answer the question now, and I totally understand, it would be helpful at some point for us to get a wise LAO style analysis of that breaks down the promises made and the extent to which the promises have been kept so far. And I understand it's only a couple of years ago, but I know there's a lot of consternation in the legislature about a lot of the commitments that were made to us in the build up to the passage of that bill, and I would like some. It would be nice to move from beyond frustrated chatter amongst members to more grounded data for us to really ground truth a lot of the wildly divergent assertions being made about the extent to which the commitments are being met.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Allen. Let us follow up with your office and see sort of what would be possible and, in the time frame that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Right. Well, there are still some further detailed questions I have, but I think what, you're hearing that we are frustrated. I'm frustrated when you hear the numbers, say, on PG&E profits at a time when we're asked to give additional loans, as well as, in other areas of policy where the PUC is limiting distributed generation, for example, partly because of concerns about the cost of the grid, and then you see profits, and that doesn't add up. It simply doesn't add up. So you're hearing some of the frustration in a variety of ways. Just to get a couple other specifics here. One, just to get back to the base cost, because maybe my initial read was incorrect, where I was sort of saying that $741.4 million was sort of very, very likely. I mean, just to clarify, because your response sort of indicate that if their generation, say, is lower than forecast, then they may get less than that amount from DOE. Is that correct?
I want to clarify that wasn't my intent. My intent was only to say that I don't know whether it would go up or down, so I didn't want to speculate.
Well, first of all, the 741.4 is a cap, right? That there's no this Department of Finance. There's no way that base cost would exceed that. Is that correct? I think that's pretty clear.
We'll have to go back and verify that. We'll have to verify that. Okay.
Yeah, because that's my understanding is that that those base costs would not go up, but we could get less than the 741.4 million. So if you could confirm that would be
sure.
Very helpful. And then just one last point. I know we talked about the kind of excess revenue generation, but relative excess revenues really relative to costs, and that doesn't seem feasible. It doesn't seem given historical performance, unless again you'll get back to us on what those were. That is likely. I wanted to get to this question of performance-based disbursement, because my understanding is that in the loan, we gave PG&E performance-based disbursements to, I think, $300 million or so to spend. So number one, is that correct? And what is this funding going towards?
Yes, so that is correct. It is up to $300 million for the performance-based disbursements, and per the legislation, that is a $7 per megawatt hour payment for each megawatt hour of generation for the Diablo Canyon units, and again, capped up to $300 million. So the provisions within SB 846 were pretty straightforward. It said that so at the various highest level, no amount of the loan proceed can be treated as shareholder profits or paid out as dividends. But specifically for the performance-based disbursements, they would only be paid out to PG&E if Diablo Canyon continued to pursue an extension of its operating period and continued with safe and reliable operations of the power plant. So those were the only two provisions provided under SB 846. So per Senator Allen's question, that's two major things that DWR has verified. But we really went above and beyond and did more collaboration with our colleagues at the California Public Utilities Commission. So not only did we take that basic a requirement from SB 846, but we made sure that in our discussions with the CPUC that we were also giving strong indication to PG&E about where these performance-based disbursements would be better spent for the benefit of the state. So, for example, in 2023, PG&E identified that there were two areas that they thought the PBDs could be used towards. And again, this was discussed with California Public Utilities Commission. So the first one was the REACH program, and that's Relief for Energy Assistance Through Community Help. That is a program designed to assist low-income persons who are experiencing unexpected financial hardships and are unable to pay energy bills. So that was one allocation of the performance-based disbursements. And another one in 2023 was to look at funding for quality management and distribution system inspection categories. That's related to electric inspections and vegetation management. So again, we not only looked at these categories, but also PG&E confirmed that these costs were not recoverable by rates otherwise overseen by entities such as PUC or the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. So we went above and beyond the actual legislative requirement to make sure that these funds were directed in a way that was going to be beneficial to the state overall.
You may have addressed this, but just to be clear that there is a prohibition on not allowing these performance-based disbursements to be used to pay dividends or for shareholder profits.
Correct. In fact, that's for the entirety of the loan.
Entirety of the loan. And how do you enforce that?
So for the costs incurred for the actual license renewal, PG&E is required to provide DWR with a detailed spend that they have, and so DWR reviews that also in consultation with the California Public Utilities Commission, and similarly with the performance-based disbursements, all of that is reviewed by both DWR and in consultation with PUC.
Okay, again, but federal funds can't be used to repay that, the performance-based disbursements, correct? So for the separate question, but thank you for that answer. Okay. But federal funds, can federal funds be used to repay that, the performance-based, the PBDs, as we call them?
Yes, so I think what is a little bit confusing is that really when we look at it, it's all one loan. So should DOE approve the credits and they're awarded back to be used to repay the loan, it's the entirety of the loan, so it's not parsed out in different buckets. So it wouldn't be attributed to PBDs or not PBDs. It's just paying back the entirety of the state loan. So it can, I guess, in other words, it can apply towards PBDs, but again, it's not specifically.
It's not my understanding. I may ask a consultant to look into that a little bit. Our understanding is that we heard directly from the company that federal funds can't be used to repay the PBDs.
If that is a stipulation on the agreement between PG&E and DOE, again, DWR is not privy to that agreement. So whether Department of Energy wants to consider performance-based disbursements, that's not something DWR would be privy to. But from DWR's perspective, there are three buckets or three pathways that the loan can be repaid, and there's no restriction on how the loan can be repaid. So it's not as if, one bucket of money, for example, the DOE funds, can only repay non-PBDs. For DWR's perspective, it's all one state loan. Any of those three pathways can repay the entirety of the state loan.
Okay, but just to get back to what I said earlier, really, the DOE has the base credits, which we've said we may get, but may not get the full amount of the $741 before the $359 million in incremental transition costs, which I think we cast some doubt in this hearing whether we will likely to get those. Those are really the main federal buckets, right? Those two buckets, correct, Department of Finance?
Yeah, Surgeon Department of Finance, from the 1.1 up to 1.1 billion award, those are the two main buckets. But again, there's a couple other potential pathways. So there's just uncertainty at this point in
Is
time.
there other federal funding you think might?
So that's one of the pathways. Acknowledging there's still a few years to go, and there might be other federal funding opportunities, and that's the one thing that we're exploring. To the extent there are federal funding opportunities that we believe could also support this and the repayment of the loan, then we would also work with PG&E to make sure we're trying to maximize as much of that as possible.
Okay. Probably just about three more questions here, and then we'll move on unless something else comes up. But just want to clear, you started with the REACH program. My understanding is that's typically funded by shareholders and employees of PG&E. So has PG&E disclosed that the funding for this program has come from California taxpayers?
We'll have to go. I'll have to go back and get more information on that. I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, that would be helpful. Okay. The two other things. The PG&E stated publicly intends to extend the operations of Diablo Canyon if the federal government will allow it. So I just want to be clear. Is it possible the loan would not be repaid until after 2030? I mean, just say it gets extended further. Is it possible the loan wouldn't get repaid till 2030 or past 2030?
Yeah, I would say the timing is definitely uncertain. We don't have a clear sense yet. I think the earliest it would be 2027 on the DOE nuclear credit award, but that's the earliest. And so there is still some uncertainty on exactly when the repayment would start.
Okay. I think we should make sure that, if somehow it gets extended beyond that the repayment happens on the timeline that we expect. So I just think that's important to clarify. And finally, for DWR, and I appreciate you going through all this with us. Obviously, there's a lot of detail here, but I think there's some follow-up that we're going to need. DWR received $7.5 million for administration costs. Of this amount, how much has the department spent, and where has that funding gone?
All right, happy to answer that. Thus far, the latest data that I have is we are in the realm of about $2 million incurred since the beginning of our administration of the loan with PG&E. So that's a breakdown between our staff as well as consulting. The consultants are fairly critical because I think, as most people recognize, DWR does not have innate nuclear expertise, and so we do rely heavily on getting the right experts with the relevant nuclear industry experience, especially those that have gone through actual relicensing processes. So we have some basis for benchmarking and understanding kind of where PG&E and Diablo Canyon is as compared to all the other power plants that have nuclear power plants that have gone through a similar process. And so those are our major expenditures at this time.
Will this amount be repaid by PG&E? These administrative costs?
So the entirety of the loan, including this administrative cost, which comes out of the loan, are expected to be repaid. It's part of the repayment.
Okay. All right. We will certainly keep track of that. Let me just look quickly through. I think we covered a lot here. Just see if there's anything else that we did not cover. Well, we do have a hold open recommendation, so I think we'll probably be coming back to this one. So I appreciate you being here and answering all our questions, and look forward to continuing to discuss this. And again, we're focused not on the merits of doing, really just on the loan itself, and just making sure we understand before we do this, as we're asked for this additional piece, what we may or may not be on the hook for going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. We will continue with DWR on the flood management proposals, issue number 9.